The morning sun cast long shadows across the Walter Reed Medical Center parking lot as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez pulled his beat-up Honda Civic into a visitor's space. His hands trembled slightly as he turned off the engine, not from nerves, but from the 3 cups of coffee he'd downed during the 2-hour drive from Quantico. At 22, Marcus was the youngest Marine in his unit, fresh out of basic training and still adjusting to the weight of responsibility that came with his new assignment. Marcus had volunteered for the Wounded Warrior Support Program, thinking it would be straightforward. Visit injured servicemen, offer encouragement, maybe play some cards or watch TV. Nothing had prepared him for what he was about to encounter in room 247. The hospital corridors smelled of disinfectant and hope mixed with despair. Marcus's combat boots squeaked against the polished floors as he made his way past rooms filled with warriors in various stages of recovery. Some were missing limbs, others bore invisible wounds that ran deeper than any physical injury. Each room told a story of sacrifice that Marcus was only beginning to understand. Room 247 stood at the end of the hallway, its doors slightly ajar. Through the gap, Marcus could see a figure lying motionless on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling with the kind of emptiness that made experienced nurses look away. The chart outside the door read, Chief Petty Officer Daniel Thompson, Navy SEAL Team 6. Below that, in smaller print, were medical codes that Marcus didn't understand but knew weren't good. Marcus knocked softly on the doorframe before entering. Chief Thompson, I'm Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from the Marine Corps. I'm here as part of the Wounded Warrior Visitor Program. The man on the bed didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling tiles, as if they contained answers to questions no one else could hear. Daniel Thompson had once been the kind of warrior that other special operations forces looked up to. At 34, he'd completed more high-risk missions than most SEALs saw in their entire careers. His record included counterterrorism operations in Syria, hostage rescues in Somalia, and classified missions that would never see the light of day. Now, Daniel's left leg ended just below the knee, wrapped in pristine white bandages that couldn't hide the reality of his situation. Shrapnel scars crisscrossed his arms and face like a roadmap of violence. But the deepest wounds weren't visible. They lived in his eyes, in the way he flinched at sudden sounds, in the nightmares that made him afraid to sleep. Marcus pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. I know you probably don't want visitors right now, Chief, but I've got nowhere else to be, and honestly, I could use the company myself. Still no response. Marcus had been warned about this. Some wounded warriors went weeks without speaking to anyone except medical staff, and even then, only when absolutely necessary. The transition from elite operator to hospital patient was devastating for warriors who'd built their identity around being unstoppable. I brought some books, Marcus continued, pulling a small stack from his backpack. Tom Clancy, Brad Thor, some military history. Figured you might like something to read when the TV gets boring. Daniel's eyes shifted slightly, focusing on Marcus for the first time. The young Marine was smaller than most special operations personnel, maybe 5'8", and lean. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his boots shined to mirror brightness. Everything about him screamed, new guy, the kind of eager recruit that veterans either mentored or ignored. You ever been downrange, Marine? Daniel's voice was rough from disuse, barely above a whisper. Marcus straightened in his chair. No, Chief. Just finished training last month. This is my first assignment. Daniel let out a bitter laugh that contained no humor. Figures. They send a boot to babysit the broken seal. The comment stung, but Marcus had thick skin. Growing up in East LA had taught him that respect was earned, not given. Maybe so, Chief. But I'm here anyway. Daniel turned away, dismissing the young Marine with the kind of cold shoulder that had ended previous visits from well-meaning volunteers. But Marcus didn't leave. Instead, he opened one of the books and began reading silently to himself, occasionally glancing at the various machines monitoring Daniel's vital signs. The hours passed slowly. Nurses came and went, checking Daniel's medications and adjusting his foredrip. A physical therapist stopped by to discuss upcoming sessions that Daniel had been avoiding. A psychiatrist made notes on a clipboard while asking questions that Daniel answered with grunts or silence. Through it all, Marcus remained in his chair, sometimes reading, sometimes just sitting quietly. He didn't try to force conversation or offer empty platitudes about everything being okay. He simply existed in the space, a steady presence that asked for nothing in return. As afternoon faded to evening, Daniel finally spoke again. "Why are you still here, Marine?" Marcus looked up from his book. "Told you, Chief. I've got nowhere else to be." "Don't you have a family? Friends? Girlfriend?" Marcus shrugged. "Family's back in California. Most of my friends are either still in training or deployed. And the girlfriend thing, let's just say military life isn't for everyone." Daniel studied the young Marine's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. He'd learned to read people during his years in special operations, a skill that had kept him alive in dangerous places. What he saw in Marcus was something unexpected, genuine honesty without the false sympathy that most visitors brought. "You know what I used to do, Marine? I know you're SEAL Team 6, Chief. That's about it." Daniel nodded slowly. 26 missions in 3 years. Counterterrorism, hostage rescue, direct action. I was good at what I did. Really good. I bet you were, Chief. Now look at me. Daniel gestured toward his missing leg. Half a man in a hospital bed, afraid of his own shadow. Marcus closed his book and leaned forward. "Chief, I may be just a boot, but I know enough to understand that what you did mattered. Those 26 missions? People are alive today because of what you did. Families got to see their loved ones come home because you were willing to go into the darkness." Daniel's jaw tightened. Easy words from someone who's never been there. "You're right," Marcus admitted. "I've never been downrange. Never been shot at. Never had to make life or death decisions in a split second. But I've seen the aftermath. My cousin did 3 tours in Afghanistan with the Army Rangers. Came home with PTSD so bad he couldn't leave his apartment for 6 months. The room fell silent again. Outside, the sound of helicopters landing on the hospital's helipad reminded both men that the war continued even as they sat in this sterile room. "What happened to your cousin?" Daniel asked eventually. "He got help. Took time, took work, but he got better. He's a police officer now, back in LA. Says the training he got in the Army helps him deal with the worst situations on the street." Daniel absorbed this information without comment. He'd heard success stories before, but they always seemed to apply to other people, never to him. The idea that he could recover, that he could find a new purpose beyond the teams, felt impossible from where he lay. "Chief, can I ask you something?" Daniel nodded. "What's the hardest part? The leg, or something else?" The question caught Daniel off guard. Most people focused on the obvious injury, the missing limb that would require prosthetics and months of rehabilitation. But Marcus had identified something deeper. "The dreams," Daniel said after a long pause. "I dream about the mission where this happened. Over and over. Sometimes I save my teammate. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm the one who doesn't make it home." Marcus listened without interrupting, understanding instinctively that Daniel needed to talk more than he needed advice. "There were 4 of us that day," Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "Infiltrating a compound in Syria where they were holding American hostages. Intelligence said light resistance, quick in and out. But intel was wrong." The memories came flooding back as Daniel spoke. The weight of his gear, the smell of diesel fuel, and fear, the way the morning light caught the dust motes in the air as their helicopter descended toward the landing zone. He could still feel the adrenaline surge as they fast-roped to the ground, the practiced efficiency of a team that had worked together for years. "We breached the compound at 0400. Should have been easy, but they were waiting for us. IED took out our exit route, small arms fire from 3 directions. My teammate Jake stepped on a pressure plate trying to reach the hostages." Daniel's hands clenched into fists as he relived the moment. "I went back for him. Couldn't leave him there. That's when the second device went off. Took my leg, but I got Jake out. He made it home to his wife and kids." Marcus remained silent, sensing that Daniel needed to finish the story. "Command says I'm a hero. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, the whole package. But all I can think about is how I almost got everyone killed because I wouldn't leave Jake behind. Would you do it differently if you had the chance?" Marcus asked. Daniel considered the question seriously. "No. Jake's got a family. 2 kids under 10. His wife just had their 3rd baby. I couldn't live with myself if I'd left him there." "Then, you already know you're not broken, Chief." The words hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Daniel looked at the young Marine with new eyes, seeing past the pressed uniform and eager demeanor to something more substantial underneath. What's your story, Marine? Why'd you volunteer for this program? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My brother was a Marine. Did 2 tours in Iraq before I was old enough to enlist. He used to tell me stories about the guys he served with, how they looked out for each other no matter what. He was killed in a car accident 3 years ago, before I could join up and serve alongside him. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Chief. Point is, he always said that being a Marine meant more than just fighting. It meant taking care of the brotherhood, especially when brothers were down. So when I heard about this program, I figured it was a way to honor his memory. Daniel found himself genuinely curious about this earnest young Marine who'd spent an entire day in his room without asking for anything in return. What was your brother's name? Sergeant David Rodriguez, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. He was a squad leader, earned a Navy Cross for actions in Ramadi. The name meant nothing to Daniel, but the pride in Marcus's voice when he spoke about his brother was unmistakable. It reminded Daniel of how he used to talk about the teams, back when he believed he was invincible. He sounds like a good Marine. The best, Marcus agreed. He used to say that Marines never leave a man behind, whether it's on the battlefield or in a hospital bed. As evening settled over Walter Reed, Marcus finally stood to leave. I'll be back tomorrow if that's okay with you, Chief. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, Marine. That would be okay. After Marcus left, Daniel stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about brotherhood and sacrifice and the weight of carrying on when everything felt broken. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, he didn't feel completely alone. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Daniel's mood as he stared out the window at the parking lot below. Physical therapy was scheduled for 0900, another session he'd been planning to refuse. The prosthetics specialist wanted to start fitting him for an artificial leg, but the idea of learning to walk again felt overwhelming. Marcus arrived at 0830 with coffee and donuts from a shop off base. Figured you might be tired of hospital food, Chief. You figured right. Daniel accepted the coffee gratefully, surprised by how much he'd been looking forward to the young Marine's return. How'd you sleep? Like shit, same as always. But I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About what? About not being broken. Daniel took a sip of coffee, savoring the real flavor after days of hospital swill. Maybe you're right. Maybe losing the leg doesn't mean losing everything else. Marcus smiled for the first time since Daniel had known him. That's good to hear, Chief. What changed your mind? You did, Marine. You and that story about your brother got me thinking about what he would want, what my team would want. They wouldn't want me to give up. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A Navy commander entered, his uniform pristine and his bearing suggesting he was used to being the most important person in any room. Chief Thompson, I'm Commander Harrison from SOCOM. I wanted to check on your progress and discuss your future with the teams. Daniel straightened in his bed, muscle memory making him assume a more military bearing despite his injuries. Good morning, sir. Commander Harrison glanced at Marcus dismissively. Could we have some privacy, Chief? The Marine can stay, sir. He's good people. Harrison frowned, but didn't argue. Very well. Chief, I'll be direct. The Navy is prepared to offer you a medical retirement with full benefits. Given your service record and injuries, you'd receive 100% disability and could transition to civilian life with significant support. Daniel had been expecting this conversation, but hearing the words out loud still hit hard. Medical retirement meant the end of his career, the end of the only life he'd known for over a decade. What are my other options, sir? Frankly, Chief, there aren't many. Your injuries preclude you from returning to active SEAL operations. You could potentially take a training role or administrative position, but it would mean staying stateside permanently. Marcus watched the exchange silently, recognizing the weight of the decision Daniel was facing. The military was more than a job for special operations personnel. It was identity, purpose, family. Losing that connection would be like losing a piece of his soul. I need time to think about it, sir. Of course. But don't take too long, Chief. The sooner we process your paperwork, the sooner you can start rebuilding your life. After Commander Harrison left, Daniel sat in silence for several minutes. The coffee had grown cold in his hands, but he didn't seem to notice. Tough decision, Chief? The toughest, Daniel replied. Being a SEAL isn't just what I do, Marine. It's who I am. Without the teams, I don't know what's left. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking about his brother's stories and the lessons they contained. Chief, can I tell you something my brother used to say? Go ahead. He said that being a Marine wasn't about the uniform or the rank or even the missions. It was about the values we carry inside us. Courage, honor, commitment. Those things don't disappear just because circumstances change. Daniel looked at the young Marine with growing respect. Despite his lack of combat experience, Marcus possessed wisdom that came from somewhere deeper than training manuals. You think I can still be a SEAL without being a SEAL? 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first entered Daniel's hospital room, and the changes were subtle but significant. Daniel no longer stared at the ceiling with empty eyes. He'd started attending physical therapy sessions, though he approached them with grim determination rather than enthusiasm. The prosthetic specialist had begun the fitting process for his new leg, a high-tech device that promised mobility but couldn't replace what he'd lost. Marcus arrived each morning at the same time, carrying coffee and whatever book he thought Daniel might find interesting. They'd developed an easy routine built on mutual respect and growing friendship. Daniel shared stories from his SEAL operations, carefully edited to remove classified details, while Marcus listened with the attention of someone who understood the weight of such experiences. On this particular morning, Marcus noticed something different in Daniel's demeanor. The SEAL was sitting up in bed, fully dressed in his Navy uniform instead of the hospital gowns he'd been wearing. His hair was freshly cut, and he'd shaved off the beard that had grown wild during his weeks of recovery. You look official today, Chief. Something happening. Daniel gestured toward a stack of papers on his bedside table. Medical board review. They're determining my fitness for duty and finalizing my discharge status. Marcus could hear the tension in Daniel's voice. Despite weeks of physical therapy and psychological counseling, the idea of leaving the Navy still felt like a death sentence to the career SEAL. How are you feeling about it? Scared, Daniel admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. I've been a SEAL for 12 years, Marine. It's all I know how to be. The thought of starting over as a civilian at 34 feels impossible. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened and 3 officers entered the room. A Navy captain led the group, flanked by a medical officer and a psychiatrist. Their expressions were professional but not unkind, the faces of people who delivered similar news to hundreds of wounded warriors. Chief Thompson, I'm Captain Martinez, Chairman of the Medical Review Board. We're here to discuss our findings regarding your fitness for continued military service. Daniel straightened further, falling into the military bearing that had become second nature over his career. Yes, sir. First, let me say that your service record is exemplary. 26 successful combat operations, multiple commendations, and the respect of your peers and superiors. The Navy is proud of your contributions to national security. Marcus could see Daniel's jaw tighten at the formal tone, recognizing the setup for disappointing news. However, Captain Martinez continued, your injuries preclude you from returning to active special operations duty. The medical board has determined that you are unfit for continued service in your current capacity. The words landed like physical blows. Daniel had known this moment was coming, but hearing it officially still felt devastating. We are prepared to offer you a medical retirement with full benefits, effective immediately. You'll receive 100% disability compensation and access to all veteran services. It's an honorable discharge that reflects your sacrifices for our country. Daniel nodded slowly, his training preventing him from showing emotion in front of superior officers. I understand, sir. What are the timelines? You can be processed out within 2 weeks if you accept our recommendation. Of course, you have the right to appeal, but given the nature of your injuries, the outcome would likely remain the same. After the officers left, Daniel sat in stunned silence despite having expected this outcome for weeks. The finality of it felt crushing, like watching his identity disappear on official letterhead. Marcus waited several minutes before speaking. Chief, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. It's not about what I wanted, Marine. It's about facing reality. I'm done. 12 years of training and operations, and it's over because I stepped on a piece of metal. You didn't step on anything, Chief. You went back for your teammate. There's a difference. Daniel looked at Marcus with frustration building in his eyes. Don't you get it? I'm not a SEAL anymore. Without the teams, I'm just another broken veteran trying to figure out how to live in a world I don't understand. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where other wounded warriors were learning to navigate the world with new limitations. Some were in wheelchairs, others walking with prosthetics, all of them fighting their own battles against despair. Chief, can I ask you about something that's been bothering me? What's that? You keep talking about not being a SEAL anymore, like it's something that can be taken away by paperwork. But everything I've learned about special operations says it's not about the uniform or the official status. It's about who you are inside. Daniel's frustration flared. Easy for you to say, Marine. You've never had to lose everything that defined you, haven't I? Marcus turned from the window, his expression more serious than Daniel had ever seen it. I told you my brother was killed in a car accident. What I didn't tell you was that I was driving. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Daniel studied the young Marine's face, seeing pain that ran deeper than anything he'd shared before. We were coming home from a family barbecue. David had been drinking a little, nothing serious, but he asked me to drive. I was 19, just got my license back after some teenage stupidity. I thought I was being responsible. Marcus sat back down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. It was raining. Car ran a red light and hit us on David's side. He died instantly. I walked away without a scratch. Daniel felt something shift inside him as he listened to Marcus's story. The young Marine who'd seemed so optimistic and untested suddenly appeared much more complex. The guilt nearly killed me, Marcus continued. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't look at myself in the mirror. My parents didn't blame me, but I blamed myself. I was supposed to protect my big brother, not get him killed. That wasn't your fault, Marine. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't stop the nightmares or the feeling that I should have been better, faster, more aware. Sound familiar? The parallel hit Daniel like a physical blow. His own guilt over the mission that cost him his legs stemmed from the same place. A warrior's belief that he should have been able to control the uncontrollable. How did you get past it? I haven't, not completely. But I learned something important from David's Marine buddies who came to his funeral. They told me that my brother wouldn't want me to waste my life drowning in guilt. He'd want me to honor his memory by becoming the best Marine I could be. Marcus looked directly at Daniel as he spoke. They said David used to talk about me all the time, how proud he was that his little brother wanted to serve. He saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. What does this have to do with my situation? Everything, Chief. You're so focused on what you've lost that you can't see what you still have. You're still the same man who went back for his teammate. You're still the warrior who completed 26 successful missions. Being discharged from the Navy doesn't erase any of that. Daniel absorbed these words, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the day he woke up in the hospital. But what am I supposed to do now? I don't know how to be anything except a SEAL. Maybe that's the wrong question, Marcus suggested. Maybe instead of asking what you're supposed to do, you should ask what you want to do. What would give your life meaning beyond the uniform? The question caught Daniel off guard. He'd spent so many years focused on the next mission, the next deployment, that he'd never considered what he might want outside of military service. I don't know, he admitted. I've never thought about it. That's okay. You've got time to figure it out. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and then a scream that made both men freeze. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his Marine instincts kicking in even though he had no idea what was happening. A nurse burst through the door. We need help. There's been a shooting in the parking lot. Someone's barricaded themselves in the visitor center with hostages. Through the window, Daniel could see police cars arriving with flashing lights. Tactical units were setting up a perimeter while hospital security tried to evacuate patients and visitors from the building. How many hostages? Daniel asked, his SEAL training automatically engaging. We don't know. Maybe 6 or 8 visitors. The gunman is demanding to speak to someone from Special Operations. Says he's a veteran who's been denied benefits. Daniel felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with crisis situations. His mind began automatically analyzing the tactical situation, considering angles of approach and potential solutions. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly alive. Chief, you can't be thinking what I think you're thinking, Marcus said, recognizing the change in Daniel's demeanor. I'm thinking that there are innocent people in danger, and I might be able to help. You're injured. You're not cleared for duty. You could make things worse. Daniel looked at Marcus with the steady gaze of a man who'd made countless life-or-death decisions. Marine, everything you just said about still being a SEAL on the inside, this is what that means. Those people need help, and I have the training to provide it. Through the window, they could see the tactical team setting up their equipment. The standoff was escalating, and Daniel could read the situation like a book he'd studied for years. Someone was about to make a decision that could get innocent people killed. What do you need me to do, Chief? Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks, recognizing the same warrior spirit in Marcus that he'd seen in his SEAL teammates. I need you to get me down to the command post and convince them to let me talk to this guy. Whatever's eating at him, it's something I might understand. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Yes, Chief. Let's go save some people. As they left the hospital room, Daniel moving awkwardly on his new prosthetic, but with determined purpose, both men felt something important had shifted between them. The wounded warrior was stepping back into his true role, and the rookie Marine was about to learn what it really meant to serve others. The elevator ride down to the ground floor felt eternal, each second bringing them closer to a situation that would test everything they'd learned about courage, duty, and the bonds between warriors. Outside, the sound of sirens filled the air as law enforcement prepared for a confrontation that could end in tragedy. Chief, Marcus said as the elevator doors opened, what if they won't listen to us? Daniel checked his uniform one last time, straightening his ribbons and ensuring he looked every inch the professional warrior he'd always been. Then, we make them listen, Marine. Sometimes that's what it takes to do the right thing. The lobby of Walter Reed Medical Center had been transformed into a command center. FBI agents worked alongside military police and hospital security to coordinate their response to the hostage situation. Radio chatter filled the air as tactical teams reported their positions and assessed potential entry points. Daniel approached the senior FBI agent, a woman in her 40s whose bearings suggested extensive experience with crisis situations. Agent, I'm Chief Petty Officer Thompson, Navy SEAL Team 6. I understand you have a hostage situation involving a veteran. Agent Sarah Chun looked up from her tactical display, taking in Daniel's uniform and obvious injuries. Chief, I appreciate your offer to help, but this is an FBI matter now. We have trained negotiators on the way. Ma'am, with respect, how long will that take? And do your negotiators understand what it's like to feel abandoned by the system they served? The question hit home. Chun had dealt with enough veteran-related incidents to know that traditional negotiation techniques sometimes fell short when dealing with warriors who felt betrayed by their own government. What are you proposing, Chief? Let me talk to him. Veteran to veteran. Sometimes that connection can break through when nothing else will. Marcus stepped forward. Agent Chun, the chief knows what he's doing. He saved more lives than you can imagine. Chun studied both men, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. The hostage taker had specifically asked for someone from Special Operations, which suggested he might be more receptive to Daniel than to a traditional negotiator. What's your assessment of the situation, Chief? Daniel looked at the tactical display showing the visitor center's layout. Classic barricade situation with emotional triggers. He's not a terrorist or career criminal. He's a warrior who's lost his way. That means he's still reachable if we approach him correctly. And if you're wrong, then you proceed with your tactical response as planned. But give me the visitor center stood 50 yards from the main hospital building, a modern glass structure that had become a fortress. Through the windows, tactical observers could see movement, but couldn't get a clear count of hostages or determine the gunman's exact position. The man had chosen his location well, multiple exits, good sight lines, and enough civilians to ensure law enforcement would proceed carefully. Daniel studied the building through binoculars while Agent Chun briefed him on what they knew about the situation. The hostage taker had identified himself as Army Sergeant First Class Michael Torres, a veteran of 3 deployments in Afghanistan who'd been fighting the VA for disability benefits for over 2 years. His wife had left him the previous month, taking their 2 children, and he'd been evicted from his apartment the week before. Classic case of a warrior falling through the cracks, Daniel observed, lowering the binoculars. 3 tours, probably saw heavy combat. Comes home to a system that doesn't understand what he's been through. Marcus stood beside him, studying the building with the tactical awareness he'd developed during Marine training. What's your approach going to be, Chief? Build rapport first. Let him know I understand what he's going through. Don't push too hard initially. Guys like this need to feel heard before they'll listen to reason. Agent Chun handed Daniel a radio headset. We'll have constant communication. If anything goes south, hit the emergency button and our tactical team will move immediately. Daniel clipped the radio to his uniform and checked the connection. The familiar weight of communication gear felt reassuring, a link to the professional world he'd inhabited for so many years. Chief, Marcus said quietly, are you sure about this? You're still recovering. And this guy is unpredictable. Daniel looked at the young Marine, who'd become more than just a visitor over the past few weeks. Marine, this is what I was trained for. Talking down hostile situations, connecting with people when everything's gone wrong. My leg may be different, but my mind's still sharp. I know that. I don't want to lose the best friend I've made since joining the Corps. The admission caught Daniel off guard. In all his years as a SEAL, he'd focused so intently on the mission that personal connections often took a back seat. But Marcus had become genuinely important to him, a bridge between his old life and whatever came next. You're not going to lose me, Marine. I'll be back in an hour with this situation resolved. Daniel began walking toward the visitor center, his new prosthetic creating a slight limp that he tried to minimize. Each step reminded him of what he'd lost, but also of what he'd survived. He was still breathing, still thinking, still capable of making a difference. The tactical team had established a communication line to the building, and Daniel used it to make first contact. Sergeant Torres, this is Chief Petty Officer Daniel Thompson, Navy SEALs. I understand you wanted to speak with someone from Special Operations. There was a long pause before Torres responded, his voice tight with stress and exhaustion. You really a SEAL, or are you just another cop trying to trick me? I'm really a SEAL, Sergeant. Team 6, 12 years of service. I'm calling you from the Walter Reed parking lot. I'm a patient here myself. What happened to you? Daniel chose his words carefully, knowing that building trust required honesty. IED in Syria 3 weeks ago. Took my left leg below the knee. I'm still figuring out what comes next. Another pause, longer this time. When Torres spoke again, his voice carried a note of recognition. Shit. A real operator. They actually sent someone who gets it. I get it more than you know, Sergeant. Can you tell me what's going on in there? Are the hostages okay? Yeah, they're fine. Mostly hospital visitors, couple of kids. I'm not going to hurt them. I needed someone to listen. 2 years, man. 2 fucking years of fighting the VA while they tell me my PTSD isn't service-connected. Daniel could hear the pain beneath the anger, the frustration of a warrior who'd served his country only to feel abandoned when he needed help most. How many deployments, Sergeant? 3. Helmand Province. Then, Kandahar twice. Lost my squad leader on the 2nd tour, saw my replacement get blown up on the 3rd. Came home and couldn't sleep, couldn't hold a job, couldn't even look at my kids without seeing dead faces. Daniel closed his eyes, recognizing the symptoms that plagued so many combat veterans. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the inability to connect with people who hadn't shared the same experiences. What did the VA tell you? That I was malingering. That my symptoms weren't severe enough to qualify for disability. That I needed to suck it up and move on with my life. Torres's voice cracked with emotion. Move on? How do you move on from watching your friends die? You don't, Daniel said simply. You learn to carry it differently, but you never move on. Anyone who tells you otherwise hasn't been there. The honesty seemed to resonate with Torres. Exactly. These desk jockeys at the VA, they look at you like you're trying to scam the system. Like wanting help makes you weak. Daniel could see Agent Chun watching him intently, monitoring the conversation for signs of progress or deterioration. The tactical team remained in position, ready to move if negotiations broke down. Sergeant, I want to ask you about something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Is this really about the VA benefits, or is there something deeper going on? The question hung in the air for nearly a minute before Torres responded. It's everything, Chief. The benefits, the nightmares, my wife leaving, losing my apartment. But mostly it's feeling like nobody gives a shit about what we did over there. I give a shit, Sergeant. Every warrior who's been downrange gives a shit. The problem is that the people making decisions about our lives have never walked in our boots. So what do? I've got no money, no family, nowhere to go. The VA says I'm fine, but I can't even make it through a day without wanting to put a bullet in my head. The admission sent a chill through Daniel. Suicidal ideation among combat veterans was tragically common, but hearing it expressed so directly drove home the urgency of the situation. Sergeant, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're not alone in this. There are people who understand what you're going through, and there are ways to get the help you deserve. Easy for you to say. You're still in the Navy. You've got benefits and support. Daniel made a decision that would surprise Agent Chun and the tactical team. Actually, Sergeant, I'm being medically discharged in 2 weeks. This prosthetic leg means my SEAL career is over. So I'm facing some of the same uncertainty you are. The admission created a deeper connection between the two men. Both were warriors facing unwanted transitions, both struggling with the gap between their military identities and civilian realities. How are you dealing with it, Chief? Honestly, some days better than others. I've got a good friend who's been helping me see that being a warrior isn't just about the uniform. It's about the values we carry inside us. Daniel glanced back at Marcus, who was watching the proceedings with obvious concern. This friend of mine, he's a young Marine who lost his brother in a car accident. He could have let that destroy him, but instead he chose to honor his brother's memory by serving others. What's your point? My point is that we have choices, even when everything feels hopeless. You can choose to let this situation destroy you, or you can choose to become part of the solution for other veterans facing the same problems. Torres was quiet for several minutes, processing Daniel's words. When he finally spoke, his voice was calmer but still strained. I don't know how to be anything except a soldier, Chief. The Army was my family, my purpose, my identity. Without it, I feel like I'm just drifting. That feeling is normal, Sergeant. Every warrior goes through it when they transition out. The key is finding new ways to serve, new missions that give your life meaning. What kind of missions? Daniel thought about his conversations with Marcus, about the Wounded Warrior program and the difference one person could make in another's life. Veterans helping veterans. Advocacy work to fix the problems with the VA. Mentoring young service members who are struggling with their own demons. The skills you learned in combat, leadership, problem-solving, resilience, they transfer to civilian life if you know how to apply them. Agent Chen signaled to Daniel that they were approaching the 30-minute mark. If negotiations didn't show significant progress soon, the tactical team would need to consider alternative approaches. Sergeant, I need to ask you something important. Are you ready to end this peacefully? Those hostages have families waiting for them, just like you have people who care about you. I don't know if anyone cares about me anymore, Chief. I care about you, Sergeant. Every person on this tactical team cares about bringing you home safely. Your service mattered, your sacrifices mattered, and your life matters now. Daniel could feel the conversation reaching a critical point. Torres was wavering between surrender and something more desperate. What happens if I give up? Do I go to prison? That depends on how this ends. If you release the hostages unharmed and surrender peacefully, you'll have the best possible outcome. But if this escalates, the consequences become much more severe. Daniel decided to take a calculated risk. Sergeant, I want to make you an offer. When this is over, when you're getting the help you need, I want you to work with me on veteran advocacy. Help me build something that prevents other warriors from falling through the cracks like we did. The offer seemed to catch Torres off guard. You'd want to work with the guy who took hostages? I'd want to work with a warrior who recognized he needed help and was brave enough to ask for it, even if he didn't go about it the right way initially. Another long pause. Daniel could almost hear Torres weighing his options, considering whether he had anything left to lose by trusting this fellow veteran. If I come out, Chief, will you come in and talk to me face to face? I need to look you in the eye and know you're real. Agent Chen immediately shook her head, but Daniel was already nodding. Yes, Sergeant. I'll come in and we'll talk this through together. Give me 5 minutes to think about it. The tension in the command post was thick enough to cut with a knife as Daniel waited for Torres to respond. Agent Chun paced behind him, speaking rapidly into her radio as she coordinated with the tactical team. The sniper positions remained locked on the building, ready to engage if the situation deteriorated. Marcus stood close to Daniel, his young face etched with worry. "Chief, what if this goes bad? What if he's planning something when you go in there?" Daniel checked his watch. The 5 minutes Torres had requested were almost up. "Then, I'll deal with it, Marine. But I don't think that's what this is about. He's a soldier who's lost his way, not a terrorist. There's a difference." The radio crackled to life. "Chief Thompson, this is Torres. I'm ready to talk, but I need your word that you'll come in alone and unarmed." Agent Chin immediately grabbed Daniel's radio hand. "Absolutely not. We can't send you in there without protection." Daniel gently removed her hand from the radio. "Agent, he's asking for trust. If I show up with a weapon or backup, it destroys everything we've built in the last half hour." "Chief Thompson," Torres's voice came through the radio again. "I can hear them talking in the background. I need to know you're coming in good faith." Daniel made his decision. "Sergeant Torres, this is Chief Thompson. I'm coming in alone and unarmed, just like you asked. I give you my word as a fellow warrior." Before Agent Chun could protest further, Daniel handed her his radio and began walking toward the visitor center. His prosthetic leg created an uneven gait, but he moved with the confidence of someone who'd faced much worse odds in far more dangerous places. "Daniel," Marcus called after him, using his first name for the first time. "Be careful in there." Daniel raised his hand in acknowledgement without turning around. Every step toward the building felt significant, like crossing a bridge between his old life and something new. The SEAL who'd entered Walter Reed Medical Center 3 weeks ago had been broken, defeated by his injuries, and the end of his career. The man walking into potential danger now was different, still wounded, but no longer broken. The visitor center's main entrance had been propped open, and Daniel could see Torres standing just inside. He was younger than Daniel had expected, maybe 28, with the lean build of an infantryman and the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much. His weapon was lowered but still in his hands. "Chief Thompson," Torres called out as Daniel approached the entrance. "That's me, Sergeant. Thank you for agreeing to talk." Daniel entered the building slowly, his hands visible and empty. The hostages were seated along the far wall, 6 adults and 2 children, all looking frightened but unharmed. Torres had positioned them where they'd be safe from any potential crossfire, another indication that he wasn't intending to hurt innocent people. "Jesus, they really did mess you up," Torres said, noticing Daniel's prosthetic leg. "How bad was the blast?" "Bad enough. But I'm still here, still fighting." "Same as you." Torres studied Daniel's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. What he saw was genuine understanding, the recognition that came from shared experiences with violence and loss. "You said you lost guys over there too?" Daniel nodded. "Too many. My last mission, the one where I got hit, I went back for my teammate. Couldn't leave him behind." "Did he make it?" "He made it. Got home to his wife and kids." Daniel paused, then added, "It was worth it, even knowing what it would cost me." The words seemed to resonate with Torres, who lowered his weapon slightly. "I lost my squad leader in an ambush outside Marja. Should have been me that caught the sniper's bullet, but Marcus, that was his name, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, he pushed me down and took the round himself." Daniel felt a chill at the mention of the name Marcus, thinking of the young Marine who'd become so important to his own recovery. "Survivor's guilt is a hell of a thing, Sergeant. Asking why you lived when good men died. How do you deal with it? Some days better than others. But I've learned that the best way to honor the dead is to make sure their sacrifice means something. To live a life that's worthy of what they gave up." Torres looked at the hostages, then back at Daniel. "I never meant for it to go this far, Chief. I couldn't take another rejection letter, another bureaucrat telling me my problems weren't real. I believe you, Sergeant. But now we need to figure out how to end this in a way that gets everyone home safely." Daniel took a careful step closer, noting how Torres tensed but didn't raise his weapon. "Those people behind you have families waiting for them. Kids who want their parents to come home tonight. Just like your kids are probably wondering where their dad is." "My kids hate me," Torres said bitterly. "My ex-wife tells them I'm broken, dangerous. Maybe she's right. Is that what you want them to remember about you?" That you were the guy who scared innocent people because he couldn't handle his problems. The question hit Torres like a physical blow. He looked at the hostages again, really seeing them for the first time. An elderly couple holding hands, a young mother with her teenage daughter, a man about his own age reading quietly in the corner. I'm not a bad person, Chief. I used to be a good soldier, a good father, a good husband. But everything just fell apart. You're still a good person, Sergeant. Good people sometimes make bad decisions when they're in pain. But you get to choose how this story ends. Daniel could see the internal battle playing out on Torres's face. The man was exhausted, emotionally drained from years of fighting a system that seemed designed to deny him help. What happens if I surrender? Prison. Maybe. Probably. But there's a chance for rehabilitation, for getting the help you need. And there's a chance to rebuild your relationship with your kids. Torres was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Outside, Daniel knew the tactical team was positioned and ready, waiting for his signal or any indication that negotiations had failed. Chief, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you keep going when everything you believed about yourself turns out to be wrong? The question went straight to the heart of Daniel's own struggles. How do you maintain identity and purpose when the foundation of your life is stripped away? You build something new, Daniel said finally. You take the best parts of who you were and find new ways to express them. The skills that made you a good soldier, leadership, courage, dedication, they don't disappear just because you take off the uniform. But what if I don't know how to be anything else? Daniel thought about Marcus and the Wounded Warrior program, about all the veterans who'd found new purpose after their military careers ended. Then, you learn, and you let other people help you learn. There are programs, support groups, people who understand what you're going through. Torres looked at his weapon, then at Daniel. You really think there's hope for someone like me? I know there is, Sergeant. Because 3 weeks ago, I was ready to give up too. I was lying in a hospital bed thinking my life was over, that I'd never be useful again. Then, a young Marine showed up and reminded me that being a warrior isn't about the uniform. It's about serving others, even when you're broken yourself. The Marine you mentioned earlier? Yeah, kid barely out of basic training. But he had more wisdom than I'd given him credit for. He helped me see that my story wasn't over, just different. I've never seen anything quite like that. Just two veterans talking, Agent. Sometimes that's all it takes. Marcus appeared at Daniel's side, his face a mixture of relief and admiration. Chief, when I saw you walking into that building, I thought my heart was going to stop. I'm okay, Marine. We're all okay. As Torres was led away in handcuffs, he called back to Daniel. Chief, you meant what you said about helping me. I meant every word, Sergeant. We'll get through this together. Watching the police car drive away, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since before his injury, complete certainty about his purpose. He might not be a SEAL anymore in the technical sense, but he was still a warrior, still capable of making a difference in other people's lives. Marcus, he said to the young Marine beside him, I think I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. What's that, Chief? Daniel looked back at the hospital where his recovery had begun. Then, 6 months later, Daniel stood in front of a group of 20 wounded veterans at the new Warrior Transition Center he'd established just outside Washington, D.C. The converted warehouse didn't look like much from the outside, but inside it had been transformed into something unprecedented, a comprehensive support facility designed by veterans for veterans. Marcus sat in the front row, now sporting the chevrons of a corporal and serving as the center's military liaison. Beside him sat Michael Torres, who'd been released from federal custody after serving 4 months and completing an intensive rehabilitation program. Torres now worked as a peer counselor, using his own struggles to help other veterans navigate the complex transition from military to civilian life. Today, we're welcoming 8 new participants to our program, Daniel announced to the group. Each of them has served honorably, and each of them is facing challenges that the existing system hasn't adequately addressed. The new arrivals sat nervously in the back of the room, their faces showing the same mixture of hope and skepticism that Daniel remembered from his own darkest days. There was a Marine who'd lost both arms in an IED blast, an Army medic struggling with PTSD after treating casualties in Syria, a Navy pilot whose traumatic brain injury had ended her flying career, and others carrying wounds both visible and hidden. I want to start by telling you something important, Daniel continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been exactly where they were sitting. This isn't a traditional therapy program, and I'm not a traditional counselor. I'm a warrior who fell as far as any of you, who questioned whether life was worth living, and who found a way back through the help of other people who understood. He gestured toward Torres. 6 months ago, Sergeant Torres was holding hostages because he couldn't see any other way to make people listen to his pain. Today, he's one of our most effective counselors because he knows what desperation feels like, and he knows how to climb out of it. Torres stood briefly and nodded to the new arrivals. If you're here, it means you're ready to fight a different kind of battle. The enemy isn't some foreign terrorist or ideology. It's the voice in your head that says you're broken beyond repair. And I'm here to tell you that voice is lying. After the formal introduction session ended, Daniel found himself in his office reviewing case files with Dr. Sarah Martinez, the clinical psychologist he'd recruited to oversee the center's mental health services. Dr. Martinez had specialized in veteran issues for over a decade and had been instrumental in developing the center's innovative approach to treatment. The preliminary results are encouraging, she said, reviewing data from their first 6 months of operation. 93% completion rate for our program, compared to 47% for traditional VA programs. And, more importantly, our participants are showing sustained improvement in employment, relationships, and overall life satisfaction. Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling a satisfaction that surpassed anything he'd experienced during his SEAL career. What do you think makes the difference? Peer support, primarily. When a veteran hears advice from someone who's been through similar experiences, it carries weight that professional counseling alone can't match. But there's something else. Your participants feel like they're part of a mission again. They're not just receiving help. They're contributing to something larger than themselves. The observation struck at the heart of what Daniel had learned about veteran transition issues. Military service provided more than just employment. It offered identity, purpose, and brotherhood. Successful transition required replacing those elements with civilian equivalents. A knock on the door interrupted their discussion. Marcus entered, his expression serious. "Chief, we've got a situation developing. That Army Ranger who started the program last week, Sergeant Peterson, he's missing from his quarters and left a note that has his roommate worried." Daniel was on his feet immediately, his SEAL training kicking in. What did the note say? Just that he was sorry for wasting everyone's time, and that some wounds never heal. His roommate found it an hour ago. Dr. Martinez was already gathering her crisis intervention materials. "Do we have any idea where he might have gone?" "I've got people checking the usual places," Marcus replied. "The mall, the bridge, the metro stations. But there's something else." His roommate mentioned that Peterson's been talking about some place that holds special meaning to him. Something about a secret code or phrase. Daniel felt a chill of recognition. During group sessions, Peterson had mentioned serving in Afghanistan with a unit that had developed their own traditions and codes to maintain morale. If he was contemplating suicide, he might return to a place connected to those memories. Did he ever mention specific locations? Places where his unit operated or trained? Marcus consulted his notes. He mentioned Arlington National Cemetery a few times. Said he visits his squad leader's grave there when he's feeling disconnected. "That's where he is," Daniel said with certainty. "Dr. Martinez, can you coordinate with local authorities while Marcus and I head to Arlington?" 20 minutes later, Daniel and Marcus were walking through the hallowed grounds of Arlington National Cemetery as evening shadows lengthened between the white headstones. The cemetery held special significance for all military personnel, but for veterans struggling with survivor's guilt, it could become a dangerous place of temptation. They found Peterson sitting cross-legged in front of a grave marker, staring at the inscription with the hollow eyes Daniel recognized from his own darkest moments. Sergeant First Class Robert Miller, Peterson's squad leader, had been killed in action 3 years earlier during a Taliban ambush that Peterson had survived. "Sergeant Peterson," Daniel called softly, not wanting to startle the man. "It's Chief Thompson from the center. We've been worried about you." Peterson looked up, his face streaked with tears. "I shouldn't have survived that ambush, Chief." Miller was a better soldier, a better man. He had kids, a wife who loved him. I've got nobody. Daniel approached slowly, his prosthetic leg making soft sounds on the grass. Can I sit with you for a minute? Peterson nodded, and Daniel lowered himself to the ground beside the troubled veteran. Marcus remained standing, keeping watch for any signs of immediate danger while providing a supportive presence. Tell me about Sergeant Miller, Daniel said. What kind of leader was he? The best, Peterson replied immediately. He always said his job was to bring everyone home alive. Even when we were pinned down in that valley, his last words were instructions for getting the wounded to safety. Sounds like a warrior who understood what leadership really means. Peterson pulled something from his pocket, a small metal coin with unit insignia. This was Miller's challenge coin. He gave it to me the day before he died, said it represented the promise we made to each other to never quit, never surrender, never leave a fallen brother behind. Daniel examined the coin, feeling the weight of its significance. Challenge coins were sacred in military culture, symbols of belonging and commitment that connected warriors across time and distance. What was the promise exactly? Semper Fi, but in our own way. We'd say always forward, never forgotten. It meant we'd keep pushing ahead no matter what, and we'd always remember the guys who didn't make it home. Daniel felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. Sergeant, can I ask you something? Are you here because you want to join Miller, or because you're trying to figure out how to honor his memory? The question seemed to catch Peterson off guard. I don't know anymore, Chief. Everything feels so pointless without the unit, without the mission. What do you think Miller would say if he could see you right now? Peterson was quiet for a long moment, staring at the challenge coin in his hands. He'd probably kick my ass for giving up. He'd do more than that, Marcus interjected, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. He'd remind you that the promise works both ways. Always forward means you keep living, keep fighting, keep making his sacrifice mean something. And never forgotten means you carry his memory forward in everything you do. The young Marine's words carried unexpected weight, and Peterson looked up at him with new attention. You understand that. I understand that my brother died serving others, and the only way I can honor that is by continuing to serve. Different uniform, different mission, but the same commitment. Daniel watched the exchange, recognizing the moment when one warrior's truth connected with another's need. This was why the center worked, not because of professional expertise, but because of the bonds forged in shared understanding. Sergeant Peterson, Daniel said, I want to ask you to consider something. Instead of joining Miller here, what if you helped us save other veterans who are sitting where you are right now? What if your mission became preventing others from reaching this point? How? We're expanding the center's crisis intervention program. We need someone who's been to the edge and stepped back to help others do the same. Someone who understands the weight of that challenge coin and what it really means. Peterson looked at the coin again, then at Miller's grave marker. You think Miller would approve? I think Sergeant Miller gave you that coin because he saw something in you worth saving. And I think he'd want you to use what you've learned to save others. Slowly, Peterson stood up, still holding the challenge coin. Always forward, never forgotten. Always forward, never forgotten, Daniel confirmed. As they walked back toward the cemetery entrance, Peterson stopped suddenly. Chief, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know to come here? How did you know what the coin meant? Daniel smiled, thinking about the secret codes that connected all warriors, the unspoken understanding that transcended branch of service or specific units. Because I've got my own challenge coin, Sergeant, and my own promise to keep. 3 months later, the Warrior Transition Center hosted its first annual memorial ceremony, honoring fallen service members while celebrating the veterans who'd found new purpose in civilian life. Peterson stood at the podium, sharing his story with a crowd of veterans, family members, and supporters. Sergeant Robert Miller died saving his squad, Peterson said, his voice steady and strong. But his mission didn't end that day in Afghanistan. It continued through every veteran he inspired, every life his example touched, every person his memory motivated to keep fighting. In the audience, Daniel sat with Marcus, Torres, and Dr. Martinez, watching their program's success stories share their experiences with others who needed hope. The center now served over 200 veterans annually, with satellite programs being established in 3 other cities. Chief, Marcus whispered during Peterson's speech. Remember when you said you didn't know how to be anything except a SEAL? Daniel nodded, remembering those dark days in the hospital when his future seemed impossibly bleak. I think you figured it out, Marcus continued. You're still serving, still saving lives, still leading warriors. Just with a different kind of mission. Daniel looked around the room at faces that had transformed from despair to hope, at veterans who'd found new purpose in helping others, at families reunited with loved ones they'd almost lost to invisible wounds. We all figured it out, Marine. Together. As Peterson concluded his speech with the words, "Always forward, never forgotten," the entire audience rose in applause. Daniel felt a profound sense of completion, not because his journey was over, but because he'd found a way to transform his own pain into purpose. The wounded SEAL who'd refused help in that hospital room had become the leader of a movement that refused to let any veteran face their battles alone. His missing leg no longer represented what he'd lost. It reminded him of what he'd gained through learning that true strength came not from being invincible, but from being willing to be vulnerable enough to accept help and offer it to others. Outside, the sun was setting over the Washington skyline, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new veterans who needed support, new opportunities to prove that no warrior ever truly retires from the mission of serving others. Daniel Thompson, former Navy SEAL, current guardian of warriors in transition, was ready for whatever came next. He'd learned the most important secret code of all, that healing happens not in isolation, but in community, not through perfection, but through connection, and not by forgetting the past, but by using it to build something better for the future. The mission continued, and he was exactly where he belonged, at the visitor center where it had taken a major step forward. I want to build something that prevents situations like this. A program that helps veterans transition successfully, that makes sure no one falls through the cracks like Torres did. Marcus smiled, understanding the significance of what Daniel was proposing. Sounds like a mission worth pursuing, Chief. Yeah, Daniel agreed, feeling more alive than he had since waking up in that hospital bed. It does. As they walked back toward Walter Reed Medical Center, Daniel's prosthetic leg no longer felt like a disability. It felt like a reminder of what he'd survived and overcome. The wounded SEAL who'd entered that building was the same man walking out, but his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior had fundamentally changed. He was ready to begin the next phase of his mission. The radio went quiet, leaving Daniel standing in the parking lot with 30 pairs of eyes watching him. He'd made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but sometimes leadership required taking risks that others wouldn't take. Marcus approached from behind. Chief, that was some pretty impressive negotiating. We're not done yet, Marine. The hard part is still coming. Agent Chen joined them, her expression mixing admiration with concern. Chief, I can't let you go into that building. It's too dangerous. Agent, he's ready to surrender, but he needs that final human connection to make it real. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to save lives. Daniel looked at the visitor center, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether this situation ended with everyone going home safely or became another tragedy in the ongoing struggle to care for America's veterans. Sergeant Torres, he called into the radio, I'm ready when you are. 30 minutes to try reaching him first. Agent Chen made a decision that would define the next few hours. 30 minutes, Chief. But you go in unarmed and with full tactical oversight. Any sign that negotiations are breaking down, and we go to our contingency plan. Daniel nodded his agreement, feeling the familiar calm that came with accepting a dangerous mission. Beside him, Marcus stood ready to provide whatever support was needed, understanding that they were about to face a test that would challenge everything they believed about duty and brotherhood. As they prepared to approach the visitor center, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since waking up in the hospital. Purpose. He was about to do what SEALs were trained to do, save lives and bring order to chaos. The fact that he was missing a leg suddenly seemed irrelevant compared to the mission ahead. I think you'll always be a SEAL, Chief. The question is how you want to use that identity moving forward. The words resonated with Daniel in a way he hadn't expected. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe being a SEAL was something you carried inside, not something that could be taken away by injury or circumstance. Tell me more about this brother of yours, Marine. Sounds like he was pretty smart. Marcus smiled, settling in for another long conversation. Outside, the gray clouds were beginning to part, letting shafts of sunlight through the hospital window. It seemed like a good sign.